Myles Udland with you in New York. Another volatile day in the market. The eighth straight session that we've seen the S&P move more than 5%. Let's bring in Rick Newman right now to pivot a little bit towards the world of politics. Of course, Rick, at a time like this, politics, markets, public health, it's all one kind of big story. But, you've tracked the Trump economy very closely over the last couple of years. Certainly a different story for Trump and the economy right now. We've heard from the president almost daily, I think, for the last several days. He spoke earlier today. What were your big takeaways from that press conference, and what do you expect to hear from the administration going forward?
I think the big news for markets and investors that from the press conference today, a reporter asked him about that report that Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, had told members of Congress, prepare for 20% unemployment. That would obviously be about 6 times higher than what we have right now, and frankly, terrible. And somebody asked Trump about it. He said, no, I don't agree with that at all. So he dismissed that and said, at the most, that's a worst case scenario. So I don't know if you find that reassuring or not. Trump is also doing something else that I think could turn out to be a big mistake. He is saying that he keeps saying, I think we're going to recover very quickly. I mean, he's using, we're going to have a comeback like you've never seen. We're going to have a very swift recovery. And there are a lot of reasons to think that that is just not going to happen, most of all, because the virus itself is not going to go away in a month or two. I mean, the public health people are saying, we really need to be prepared for an 18-month time frame here, and there could be ups and downs within that time frame. But we all get it now, I think, in markets that what markets want more than a stimulus package, more than a tax cut, more than helicopter money. They want the virus to recede. They want testing to be available to everybody so we know who has it and who doesn't. And we're making progress, and Trump did talk about that. But to some extent, he's still trying to talk up the economy when the economy needs real relief, not rhetoric from Washington.
Let's kind of pivot away from what Trump is doing to who he might be facing in November. It's kind of weird at this point in time to even think about the next presidential election, but we're about 7.5 months away. And last night we had a few states continue to hold their primaries, which I think was a surprise to some. And it now seems clear that it's going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden for the presidential for the presidency in 2020.
For sure. And this is like, meanwhile, in other news that suddenly nobody cares about anymore. But Joe Biden has a lock on the Democratic nomination, unless something completely unforeseen happens, obviously. So Bernie Sanders has said he's reassessing his campaign. Everybody thought that means he's going to drop out today. But then he, made sure we understood, no, he's not dropping out today. There's almost a moral imperative for Bernie Sanders to drop out at this point. He statistically almost cannot win. And if he stays in the race, I mean, then voters are going to have to continue to go to the polls as if it's a real election. And if he were to drop out, then these remaining Democratic primaries would basically become formalities. States could even say, we're going to have very limited, encourage people to stay home. We're just going to count the mail-in votes or things like that. So I think Bernie Sanders has no choice but to drop out, and it is going to be Biden versus Trump in the general election, which, to my mind, has started. The general election has started, but there's this one technicality, which is Bernie Sanders still considers him a candidate, and he's headstrong, and nobody knows if he's going to try to go the distance or what.
One thing that got a lot of headlines early this morning was when the Dow fell below that level where we were when President Trump was inaugurated. We actually ended up closing above it. So 19,795 is that level. We closed above there on that, late rally. So what do you think the administration thinking now is on the barometer of their work there being the stock market? Have they given that up? Should we expect that President Trump isn't going to be tweeting about rallies anymore?
I don't assume that at all. And just look at what he did on last Saturday, with just 4 days ago. I mean, the market was in the toilet, but it had that big rally on Friday. So he made a big deal out of how the market recovered just as he was giving that press conference last Friday. I mean, that was completely absurd. Everybody who's been following Trump's claims about the stock market knew he never should have said that. And now look at what happened. But Trump now says he called himself today a wartime president. So he perhaps is trying to inoculate himself, and he keeps saying, no one could have seen this coming. We all know he keeps saying or implying this wasn't my fault. He's trying to persuade everybody. He knew what was going to happen here from the start when his actions clearly show otherwise. So to my mind, I think Trump at this point is counting on voters having a short memory. And he also seems to be wishing for a quick turnaround so that by the time we get to, let's say, September or October, and we're in the home stretch of the election, maybe he has a stock market turnaround to point to. And we know that the Trump administration and Congress and the Fed at this point, they're all going to throw everything they have at this crisis. And, we are talking about this with Wall Streeters right now and investors right now. We're going to be talking about this for weeks and months. When is it going to make a difference? I mean, it will make some kind of difference, but will that difference be that it just prevents a total wipeout from it being a little less bad, or it actually helps turn things around? And again, I think this is just going to take months.
Hey, Rick. So doesn't the election come down to, in a sense, how President Trump and maybe Congress to a lesser degree handles the coronavirus? And, handling it may take this tremendous, or will take this tremendous response from the federal government, which sort of goes against the grain of a Republican administration, of President Trump and his colleagues. So tell us how you think this is going to play out politically.
Well, the blame game is clearly underway, and you've got a lot of Democrats blaming Trump with, I think, what is pretty good cause for saying he should have jumped on this a lot sooner and maybe prevented this from getting as bad as it has. And there are these videos going around that showing all the times Trump diminished this and says it's going to go away. It'll be gone a month from now. So that's a liability for Trump. But you never know how voters are going to respond to all this by the time September and October comes around. So by then, will Trump be looking like he's actually presidential and he has managed a crisis that any president could have gotten stuck with in a professional and competent way? Or is he going to look like he's exploiting the whole thing for personal gain? I think one of the things to look for, whatever bailout comes, it is going to be targeted at the travel industry. How much might that benefit Trump personally? I mean, that's, how much self-dealing might be in anything that the Trump administration recommends. I think my theory all along has been that Trump's support level, always in the low 40s, was highly dependent on a solid economy, period. Not a solid economy depending on what the cause of any kind of downturn is. I think there are some voters for sure who have been saying, I don't like Trump, but the economy's doing well, so why mess with what's working? And now the economy's not doing well, and I think those people are most likely to abandon the president.
Rick, let me pick up on that point that you made about the politics of a bailout, because I think that's going to gain traction over the next few months. We're already hearing on the airline side of things, unions coming out and saying no more buybacks. Even in the good times, you didn't save up. Now you're in this position. We're talking about a potential $60 billion for Boeing. How much do you think that plays into the politics of November, when it's seen as a lot of people are going to say, look, 2008 all over again. Why are you giving these companies a break?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And for sure, I think we are going to see bailouts that look very different from what they were in 2008 and 2009. For one thing, Democrats and Nancy Pelosi control the House of Representatives. For another thing, there are a lot of bad memories. Andy Serwer and some of the rest of you all covered those bailouts as I did. They were necessary at the time. They were sort of like, hold your nose and do what's necessary. But there were some major problems with them. And one of the biggest problems was that they were basically just blank checks to the banks and some other companies saying, we're just going to give you this money, do what you feel you must with it, with no provisions for protecting jobs or things like that. And we're already seeing Senator Elizabeth Warren and many others saying, this time around, Main Street comes first. So any company that's going to get any money from the federal government, there are going to be conditions such as keep your payrolls where they are, no layoffs, no pay cuts, keep benefits where they are. And frankly, that makes sense because the bailouts last time were necessary, but they were really unpopular. Everybody, ordinary people felt like, where's my bailout? Goldman Sachs got a bailout. Where's my money? And, there were some programs to help people, but they just didn't have the effect that people wanted. So I think we're going to see a very different set of bailouts this time around.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.